I will try to make it short. And I'm Xing. Probably I know most of you here. And, I have been passionate about the direction of credible commitment for a long time, as I think it is one of the major value propositions of crypto. Whereas compared with this major value proposition, the research of crypto and formalizing the blockchain as a commitment device, and how does different designs of the blockchain commitment device impact the commitment games / coordination games played on top of it. This research has not been largely explored, and this talk would be, a simple exploration about the ideas. We basically go through a series of theory and practice examples to arrive at the central question that we want to answer, which is what is mediator extractable value? How do we better formalize blockchain commitment devices and better study MEV? Both mentioned in Barnaby and David's talk, this peculiar phenomena that arises from the specific design of blockchain as a commitment device. Okay. So let's start. So the expectations of this session is that it's going to be free form. It's not going to be a lot of slides and whiteboard mostly. Feel free to interrupt. And the motivation of this session is to, as soon as we want to make an impact and actually implement any coordination technology with commitments, whether for AIs or for humans. So I know that's something a lot of the cooperative AI folks here are working on. As long as we want to actually implement those systems, we will run into problems that involve the design choices of what substrate those commitment games that are played on. And as we have seen in blockchain, we have witnessed, through like blockchain history, the design choices of the substrate of the commitment device actually impact greatly the commitment games that are played on top. And it is non-trivial for us to navigate the trade-offs between different designs of commitment devices. So I will first start with some theory to talk about the overview of some existing work on formulating blockchains as commitment devices. So I believe all of those work on commitment devices in blockchains started mostly with the old Virgil Griffiths thesis. So Virgil was a person working, I believe, on special projects at the Ethereum Foundation a few years ago, and he had this thesis which relates to the game mining paper. And game mining is essentially saying, I'm credibly committing to a commitment that maps the set of outcomes in a game to a set of payments. So this is very much, like the principal agent problem, how to design a optimal contract. Also mentioned in David's talk. And so from there, people have started to devise games that we can play with this. With the most easy example is, of course, the example of dark DAOs. So dark DAOs basically states that you can use a blockchain or, usually a privacy enhanced blockchain to deploy a bidding ring for second price auctions. Or the example of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is basically allowing users to achieve public goods funding by committing to say that by committing to a smart contract to say that, if 100 other person agrees to fund this project, this public goods, then I also commit to fund this public good. So that is a classic like interdependent commitments. And those interdependent commitments can be formulated in a way that, I'm committing to a smart contract that reads the source code of your smart contract, which might be familiar with to the open source game theory or programming equilibrium by Moshe Tenenhaus and widely studied in corporate AI as far as I know. So going forward with this, knowing this theory of blockchains as commitment devices, what have people built? We know that people have built, the dark DAOs, the bidding rings. People have built the public goods fundings. People have also built, let's say, like the global payment system. For example, like all of the Bitcoin, Ethereum example are all like, two people are playing this game where like they can't trust each other, that if I give you the money, you might not give me the good, but like through the use of smart contracts, we make this atomic. So that's like, I commit to only giving you the money after you give me the good. And so like, the other person commits to the symmetric commitment. So that's so that increases efficiency. So of course, we know that there are various like folk theorem results about this, which is to say that if in your commitment you can only commit to a specific strategy in the normal form game, then you can achieve better equilibria. But there will always exist some game in which the optimal outcome is not achievable if you can only commit to a specific strategy. And the only way to robustly achieve the optimal outcome in given any game is if you have this ability to commit to interdependent commitments, aka the program equilibria, whatever notion. So we saw those like practices being made, but then let's focus on specifically what we are studying here. So the theory, what are some unique properties of blockchains that makes it different from other commitment devices that we traditionally study? What are some like unique things about it? So one unique thing that we have seen is that, let me use the whiteboard. Okay, so the first one is of course the block time. So block time is a notion that we, let's see. Okay, so we know commitment devices implement coordination via enforcement and the common knowledge of enforcement. We know that blockchains implement enforcement via delegate gameplay to the Ethereum virtual machine, which is like, the consensus protocols, whatever validated code that people run, secured by disinterested parties holding the commitment device. It also implements a common knowledge of this enforcement via consensus protocols to make public announcement broadcasts. However, we know that the common knowledge of enforcement means that the computation and that of delegation and the implementation of common knowledge takes time, which is a block time. And the block time is evident by that, say you are in a distributed network, you need network latency to propagate messages, to send messages to each other. You also need to do some like computation time to process the messages. And so let's just call the block time T. And then we know that, yeah.
I mean, you have to look this up, you speak out.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's good.
So you say like the implication is, okay, computation, delegation, implementation takes time, hence the block time. But there's a property block time that is discrete, right?
Yes.
So you could in principle have like a blockchain.
Yeah, you could have that.
So is that a property we care about, or should we think of blockchains more abstractly as things that like involve time, or should we take like block times as a primitive in block or so what?
Yeah, I think we should at this stage we should take them as a property of the blockchain commitment device, because in most of the designs of blockchains we have this discrete time element. The continuous time element, it's more like, say you have a rollup, right? For example, the popular rollup Arbitrum, you take you take transactions, you take people's commitments, and then you make those commitments common knowledge by somehow broadcasting to other people. But even in reality, rollups don't really implement this continuous time thing. They more often just batch transactions and then settle them onto the layer one at once. So that's really like a discrete time thing.
Yeah, but that's taking a more less normative approach and more like, okay, you observe blockchains in the wild and they have discrete block time, so then you model them as time, but you are leaving the signs out of the table, right? That could be potentially continuous time. So
yes,
mathematical model would have like continuous time.
Yeah, I agree. The study of
there's some blockchain are asynchronous, where there is no need to keep track of an external time. So yeah, I think that yeah. So people wouldn't model this like model with the. Yeah, I mean, Ethereum is partly synchronous by number correctly. So maybe you have this is a specific different context. But I mean, it's possible, definitely possible to have abstractions. Not an abstraction, but not dependent on.
Yes, yeah. yeah, for here, I'm more like emphasizing that the blockchain is like not zero. So like in say you're in proof of work, there's no like definite block time. But you know, it takes some time to implement the common knowledge, and that part is like the property that is needed for you know, that is different from traditionally how people presume the properties of a commitment device, in which they presume that the implementation of common knowledge takes zero time. Okay. Okay.
Follow. First one about this.
Oh yeah. This is this is same as the first one. So it's just saying like the implementation, the common knowledge that there is this predicated strategy space takes some time. Like where the first one is this, you know, you can predicate other people's strategy space. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so another unique property I think is that on past Ethereum, we have this public mempool. So public mempool basically means that whenever you send a commitment, the other parties is able to view your commitment before your commitment is finalized. What does it mean for a commitment to be finalized on blockchain? It means that the commitment is being is made permanently credible, and is made common knowledge that other people also knows that you have credibly committed to this action. However, you know, on Ethereum, in the old days, we have this, we still have this now, but it's much less prevalent, this public mempool, which is that whenever you first send a commitment, before this commitment is made credible, other people can see it. So, you know, as talk both in Barnaby and David's talk, people can do various bad things about it, right? So, for example, I see you have committed, tried to commit to this thing, and then I front run you. Right, I buy the asset that you want to buy before you buy them, or I can do things like sandwiches. And then the third property is that in most
second property, why the ability to it being on like finalized or on the ledger, because like it's still, if it's a digital signature, it's still gradable away.
Yeah, it's like you cannot back out if you assume the other person would like include your like commitment on the blockchain, like, right?
That's a really key assumption. Once it's out on the, once a signature is out on the public mempool, that is like gradable in a way, right?
Well, I mean, there are nonces, so like so like, right, like you can like cancel the previous commitment by sending the same transaction with like a higher nonce. But that's really like technical detail. Yeah. Right? Is that
you're ready to give a transaction, but your transaction, yeah, you always has to do a different one, but you could think of signing some arbitrary thing that means you with a different transaction where like you really couldn't back out of it unless you sign something that looks that you sign. Think that you could take that I think you've read the like once it's out, it's out.
Yeah.
You're ready to have friend.
Yes. Yeah. That I agree. Yes. Yeah. What was it? Okay. Yeah. So that's really for the second point, and then the third point is more like the mediators on blockchains control the settlement function. So the mediator is more, you know, in classical mechanism design, the mediator is often called like, I don't know, the auctioneer. And in game theory / commitment devices, the mediator is more talked about in the context of mediated equilibria, right? So everybody, instead of committing to something and have the natural coordination mechanism arises from the composition of all those individual commitments, you have the central mediator where everybody, the mediator says that here are the messages that you can send, and here is my guarantee or my commitment to say that, oh, like when you send this message, here's what will happen. Basically, the mediator implements the correlated equilibria in this way. And on blockchains, the mediator is as I mentioned, blockchains have this block time component. So during the block time, everybody sends a commitment to the blockchain, and then the mediator basically takes all of those, say, N commitments, and then only settles maybe M of all of those commitments, and it is the mediator's choice of what M out of N commitments to settle, and that gives the mediator some power on blockchains. And usually the mediator is called, the miner or the validator. Yeah. So from those three properties, we can already see some things some bad things can happen, right? So for example, with the existence of block time, we know that blockchains implement coordination via the use of commitments and common knowledge of commitments. So that means that any game that is played that within the block time, i.e. if the game starts and finishes before the block time, before the block is published, then the blockchain as a commitment device cannot coordinate that game. And in practice, we see that there is an abundance of such games. For example, financial applications, like people trading against each other, the price is constantly moving, and therefore the game of arbitraging some automated market maker on blockchain is almost, by definition, in practice, a game that is played within the block time, and therefore the blockchain cannot coordinate this game. So this is evidenced by, say, two users want to trade against want to trade some assets, and then in practice we see that those users can only commit to, I want to trade asset A to asset B using this route. However, the optimal routing can only be decided if agent A and agent B coordinate which route that they take, right? So for example, agent A and agent B want to settle against each other their asset first before batching their orders and then settle against the AMM. So then this game is like not able to be coordinated. Another game that cannot be coordinated is the game of determining the ordering of transactions inside a block. So this is a game that by definition cannot be coordinated within the block time, because it is a game about the ordering that is happening within that block. Okay, so then in practice we see a great welfare loss due to such fast games that are played within the block time, right? As I mentioned, when people cannot coordinate on determining the ordering of a block, they tend to spam orders or like collocate with the validator, spend large amounts of resources just to get a lower latency or things like that. And those things are traditionally those things and variants of such mechanisms are usually called like one specific instance is called priority gas auctions. So in that case, it's more like is that people determine the ordering of transactions inside a block by entering an all-pay auction. And that, as we all know, all-pay auction of deciding the ordering of a block is really not efficient. And what happened was that people deploy off-chain systems. As we see in Barnaby's talk, people establish additional institutions that deploy additional mechanisms, make additional credible commitments where the credibility is only assured by the, some reputation of the institution to shift the equilibria. And those new institutions act as mediators to coordinate this game, whereas the blockchain cannot self-coordinate this game. Yeah.
You say a game is not coordinated, or we're unable to coordinate it. What does it mean?
Unable to be coordinated. Yeah, so that means that a more optimal outcome is not able to be achieved because users, say, for example, cannot express their preferences or fail to So for example, in the priority gas auction, people, all of the bidders would want to say that if I fail to end up in the first of the block, then I don't want to pay anything. And they want to coordinate with other people to express such preferences. Basically, they need an auctioneer, right?
So is the idea that a game is we fail to coordinate a game if players don't have access to credible commitments. They don't have access to credible commitment devices.
Yeah, they don't have access to credible commitment devices that are fast enough. Yeah, to coordinate the games that they are playing. So another more maybe easier example is a case of two users trading some assets, right? Users want to settle against each other, but they can't because they don't know what the other user is doing, or they cannot express the preference that the other user that they want to settle against another user. Yeah. And then therefore, people implement things like coincidence of ones, which is to say that one user commits to that if there exists another user committing to trade the same amount of assets, but in the opposite direction, then I commit to trade against that user. And currently on blockchains, you cannot do these things at one block. Okay. So then in practice, we see that, as we mentioned, those unique properties impact the coordination games played on top in the way that it introduces MEV, it introduces welfare losses. So to mitigate them, the design choices that people made to the blockchain commitment device to change this is essentially or mostly to establish more institutions, right? They established more institutions to mitigate this problem that the block time and that they cannot coordinate games happening within the block time. They establish institutions to provide, say, private but programmable mempools to solve this second property problem established by the second property. They, some people try to establish institutions that provide better decentralization and encourage competition between the mediators to weaken the mediators' bargaining power in this grand scheme of the games. Okay, so then after seeing that the blockchain industry has been trying empirically to patch its protocol to go from a very bad commitment device design to increasingly better, then can we systematically study what is the drive underlying all of those patches that we make to the protocol? Why do we keep on establishing those institutions? Is there some way that we can systematically study this, and then based on our systematic study, derive some results that we can finally implement and practically implement? So I don't really have a systematic way to study, but I have some attempts. So let's let me check. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, yeah. So then let's jump onto some formalisms to present a simple study of those. Okay, so suppose we start at time t with block time, small t. Suppose all of those are, on Ethereum. Therefore, we have this, synchronous whatever commitment device. And suppose further that this blockchain commitment device exhibits all of those three properties described by us in natural language. And then within each block, we receive transactions, which are essentially commitments by the users, denoted by COM, and they are sent to the commitment device. And at the end of the block time, i.e. at the end of the block, the commitment device implements common knowledge of the commitments and their settlements, denoted by functionally matching the list of all commitments to a commitment device state by making a public broadcast of the results, right? So basically, at the start of each, say, slot, people send their respective commitments, com1, com2, com3 to com n, And then the mediator basically have all of those commitments, and then it controls the settlement function F to process those commitments. Okay, so then we can formally define crypto as this permissionless credible commitment device that consists of, say, a state S that include all of the settled commitments, the commitment constructors that people can use to produce commitments. So one example of a commitment constructor is to say that I can only commit to single strategies in the normal form game. And as we discussed before, this improves the equilibrium but cannot always achieve the optimal outcome state. And other commitment constructors on Ethereum, we know that Ethereum is Turing complete, so it essentially influences the good old program equilibria type of commitments. And then the commitment semantics or the settlement function, which is controlled by the mediator, is, as we discussed, function F takes into the list of commitments and returns the state. And then the block time T, of course, that this commitment device needs to collect, compute, settle, and then finally broadcast all of the commitments. So then let's start with our favorite example, right? The simplest prisoner's dilemma. We know that for the prisoner's dilemma, the state S is essentially the strategies that agents play in the actual prisoner's dilemma game, not the commitment, not the prisoner's dilemma game aided with the commitment. So then state S is essentially a mapping from each player's ID to the strategy that they play in the prisoner, denoted here, the 2x2 matrix. And so basically we have the commitment constructor CCOM. Basically, it is a function that takes in either a function from the prisoner's dilemma game strategy to the prisoner's dilemma game strategy. Like it's a function from the other person's strategy to your strategy, or a prison dilemma game strategy. So what this means is that I can commit to that if you play. Sorry, I wrote silent. You should really be corporate. If you commit to corporate, then I will also commit to corporate. So that's like a mapping from corporate to corporate and defect to defect. And the other person then you can check the other person should commit to defect. So then there should be two types of commitment constructors. One is like allows you to commit to a mapping from a strategy to a strategy, and the other is to commit to a strategy. And then the commitment semantics is basically checks the list of all of the commitments as an apply commitment of type strategy to commitment of the type of a mapping from strategy to strategy, as puts all of the results, the resolved results into the mapping of the state, right? So then you can check if you have such kind of commitment device, then you can, here's a sample, smart contract or the mapping that you can implement, construct using CCOM. So you can check over here, you can achieve like the optimal state. But then, over here, what about block time T actually? So about block time T, we see that PCTD are permissionless credible commitment devices. They implement coordination via common knowledge, and this is what we talked before. For any game played within block time, it cannot coordinate, and the auctioneer strategy is not certain. This is again the third property. Then often the mediator is a set of profit-seeking or even malicious agents that could collude. So then in this case, the commitment device cannot coordinate the game. So one example of this is the
Maybe possible in this commitment device to also sense that stipulating the contract that validators enter the network. That way, for example, this device that keeps track of all the commitments in the network also includes, commitment time force. Validators can bring status, for example, for buying at the station or proposing buying blobs and so forth. And that way also that's an important part of the kind of system is also represented in terms of commitments. And
You mean can it take in smart contracts sent by the validators?
No, I mean, for example, say you so validators fundamentally enter in contracts with the mediator.
Right? Yeah, it runs the validator code, yes.
And the commitments are enforced via two ways. Either enforced via valid rates. For example, valid blocks are enforced by punishment in the future. And so these commitments, my question is, I personally see them as fundamentally just having a different language. The commitments are only representing smart contracts. Yeah. So I guess my question is there perhaps a common abstraction for credible commitment device that can accommodate for both things in blocks? So for example, you can include transactions, but you can also include, for example, all the operations, all the moving chain in different commitments in this same thing. I don't know, maybe it's a weird way of explaining what I was trying to say.
You're okay. Here's a rephrase of your question. I don't know if that captures the thing, but so you're saying there are two kinds of commitments. One type is the commitment games. So one type is the actual Ethereum commitment that you make. This is like the commitment is made at the level of the validator code. The other is the commitment that the commitment that you use to play the actual commitment games on top of the blockchain. This is like commitment made on the level of smart contracts. And those two commitments, even though they are theoretically of the same, of the same expressivity, in that you can add any, the validator code is written in Go, you can add any like arbitrary commitment, and the smart contract is also Turing complete. But then they are kind of different, and how do they interface? Can we like put some part of the validator code level commitment onto the smart contract level commitment, or vice versa?
Well, that's one way to think about it. I say, for example, blocks include both transactions and operations, such as slashings and changes to the state involving validators. And so I guess my question is, basically you can think of Ethereum also as a self-reporting institution made up of commitments. And the question is, why not create a space in the commitment device structure to accommodate with these commitments in an explicit way that also allows validators to enter into new commitments that perhaps may not necessarily be specified. So this builds on something that perhaps this builds the idea of proposer commitments, where you can have perhaps the proposer into new commitments. So maybe both have the same structure.
Yeah, you could have that, because that's like you are making the validator code level commitment is like slow commitments, right? Because to change that commitment, you need social coordination of the Ethereum Foundation. And then like the smart contract level commitment is like permissionless, anybody can deploy. So then you are like, using the fast commitment to encode some commitments that should have been encoded in the slow commitment. So you can always do this because like the fast commitment device can accommodate for the slow commitments. The vice versa cannot be achieved. Yeah, and what you talked about is like kind of restaking or PEP-C by Berkeley, right? Yeah. Okay.
I have a separate question. So in your formalism, you introduce these two different types, right? The commitment on a strategy, or the commitment that there is a commitment.
Yeah.
I wonder why you need to do that, like comparing to, say, the formalism in the paper of a commitment fault theory by Aka and other people. So there they explicitly only condition their commitments on other people's commitments, right?
Yeah.
They ban this committing on strategies, and then they have these neutral devices that accommodate these commitments with your strategies. So I wonder, is this fundamentally different? Why do you need to deal with structure?
Yeah.
Why does that formalism not directly apply?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the reason I chose to explicitly have the commitment constructor is that I want a way to compare how would the expressivity of a commitment device impact the kind of the efficiency that that it can achieve. Like how, so like when we move from a less expressive commitment device to a more expressive commitment device, if by expressivity we mean that you can condition, you can add more conditioning onto your commitment language, then how does the welfare change, right? Like, so, for example, even in the simplest prisoner's dilemma example, we see that this graph, if you plot it out, the efficiency versus expressivity, it is not monotonic. It's actually like, it starts at like a very not efficient outcome. If you have a not efficient language, a not expressive language, then it rises, and then it could decrease once you increase the expressivity. So the reason is this. The reason of this is like, you can imagine, can I draw on this? Yeah, it's like you have this like very complex space and that you are trying to carve out. This is all of the outcome space. And over here is like the good outcome space, right? Over here is what you want. And then enlarging the expressivity is like, you go from, you basically draw a circle inside of this. Okay, so this is all of the outcome that you can capture. Why a circle is because drawing a circle is easy. This is an analogy to saying that in reality you cannot devise a super complicated expressive language. You can only devise a sensible language, and like doing in practice a practical sensible language is the equivalence of you can only draw a circle. You cannot like draw some like complicated like shape. Yeah, and so then increasing the expressivity is like you're like drawing a larger circle, also have the same, center. But then like drawing a larger circle actually does not necessarily allow you to, exactly carve out the desired state that you want. It could like enlarge too much, and then your welfare decreases. So if this is like expressivity and this is efficiency, then it could be something like this. Yeah. So overall it's like, because I think this this thing is at least not intuitive to me, and I think it would be interesting to study that such a formalism. And also in most of the game theory papers that I have read, it's like they kind of directly, especially in programming equilibria, they don't mention this semantics or settlement function at all. They kind of, because they were proving folk theorems, they just assume that, there exists such function that maps the two programs onto the set of strategies that those agents actually play. But in practice, if you want to actually implement anything that solves those, you need to consider, there might not actually exist such function, because even if it exists, it does not terminate. So like to capture the idea of like termination, you need to additionally define this semantics or settlement function, which in turn dictates that you must have some notion of like constructors, because like non-termination is a property of the like expressivity. Yeah,
actually, I have an explanation about that. So, okay, so I mean, because of the definition of someone recursive,
yeah,
then you could have like non-terminated. So
yeah,
how do you enforce that you can set in different?
You can.
So how does the model enforce that? Like,
Yeah, I think in practice we can only do stack overflows. The gets on Ethereum. Of course, there are many like more theoretical results. So like the most generalized one, I think, is like you use a total language, which is like you still have this Turing complete language, but whenever you pass on the commitment, you accompany your commitment with a proof saying that, if my commitment encounters whatever other people's commitment, then here is the proof that those programs will terminate. And then basically the settlement function takes the termination proof and then like checks it actually terminates. And in that way you can enforce. So basically the settlement function rejects any commitment that is not accompanied by the proof of termination. And like in the literature, like there's several, like the law theorem, classic, whatever thing. Yeah.
So when you say that expressive language or commitment of in practice not achievable. Can you talk about why that is the case? Is that because of something like the listening complication that's all, or the WTF?
Oh yeah, it's more like if you want to actually in practice draw these like super complicated shapes to actually, just like, precisely capture this outcome region that you want, you probably need something like the total language that I described. Like you still use the Turing complete language, but you require the other person to submit you a proof about the termination of your settlement function. So that thing is obviously not doable because, like, as we know, like doing some like formal proofs, especially machine checkable proofs about commitments is extremely hard. So like in practice, you can probably only draw like circles.
But I understand your claim to be different now. I thought your first claim was that there's a limitation on how expressive you can make the language.
Oh, there's no. Yeah, the most expressive language is probably like drawing a super large circle that encompasses all of those like outcome states. So that's like equivalence of like not doing that.
Why would the total language not be a large circle and outlining exactly the outcome?
Oh, because you're requiring other people to submit a proof that your your settlement function terminates.
Wait.
So it has to be.
I understand you correctly. There's two independent dimensions here. That's enlarging the circle and changing the shape. And you're equating now changing the shape to termination, which I think here or I don't think that's where you're going. So what are these two? You're saying like more expressivity.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Yes, I fucked up. Yes, yeah. They are not the same. Yes, yeah.
What is changing?
Yeah.
Enlarging, what is like changing?
The changing. Yes. Good catch. The changing the shape. Changing the shape is that it requires you as the the designer, the mechanism designer, the designer of this commitment device. You know what exactly are the games that people are gonna play on top of your commitment device, and then like you knowing the game structure, you can carve out almost exactly the space that you want. But this is not possible, say, on Ethereum, because Ethereum is Turing complete. People can use it to play whatever commitment games that they desire to play, and you can't really like carve out the cases that you want to. So a simple example is reworks or 51% attack, encouraging contracts, right? So for rework contracts is something that you don't want to get played. So you are like they're kind of over here. It is like the region that you want to evade. So then the way to actually carve out is like in your Ethereum validator code, you say that, oh, if somebody deploys a commitment that seems like a reorg contract, then I just censor it or like don't settle it, and then you can carve out this region.
Isn't then that an argument for like different patchwork of different languages, like in the local strategy group, like mindset, where it's as opposed to finding like one general language that covers it all, or like a patchwork of like more restricted languages that cover the different use cases are more applicable to the games people play.
Yeah, that's the good old app specific chain versus generalized chain arguments.
I mean, what's guarantee that every possible game corresponds to, can be expressed in terms of whatever language, whatever set of languages you're into, or that exists as well.
You have to bootstrap new languages.
But it's also just like social layer, right? If you provide a general language, you can then just have people sort of contemplate. I don't know, if I'm usually using one application or whatever, then you have this like sort of like social contract we play it. You don't have to condition what other people are doing if they're doing something completely different. It's like very animated abstract without like a implementation. But I guess you can also reach some of it up like this. It's like social norms.
So yeah, we probably should end this session.
I agree with that. I mean, obviously, it would make reaching consensus a little more tricky, but perhaps it may be easier for people to reach different conclusions using the same set of evidence. Right? There's more for ambiguity or report interpretation via social sometimes like criteria, right? Instead of some symbolic language.
Yeah, I'm not talking about enforcement, just sort of like it kind of works out because I anticipated everyone else would do something similar. But yeah, but maybe sort of point shedding.
Yeah, I would like to talk more, and I have like comment about that as well. But I think we are, over time. I should